Hello, my name's Martin Fish, and normally at the Chorley Flower Show you'll find me with a Garden Roadshow where we do the talks and the demonstrations and answer your questions, which is a bit of a highlight for us. Now obviously we can't be at the show this year, but the show organisers have sent me a list of your gardening questions, so I'm going to answer them, and what better place to do it than actually in the garden. So I thought we'd just have a little wander into my North Yorkshire garden and hopefully I can put some answers to your questions. And the first two we've got are about acers, a lovely plant, really popular. Unfortunately, I struggle to grow them in our garden. They are totally hardy, but we often get quite dry weather in the summer here, and it's very well drained soil, and they like moist soil. They naturally grow in a woodland situation, so they don't thrive in my garden like some other plants do. So I'm going to try them in containers in the future. But the two questions we've got are from Wendy Holton to start with, and it's about a tree that's growing and the leaves are brown around the edges. It's supposed to be red, but it's green with the red edges to it, and it looks like it's dying at the top. It's just not doing as it should do, and she wants to know what she can do. And the other one from Andy Phillips, also about acers. These are mature ones, 6 to 12 feet high, and this year he said it's been bad for them, and they've lost about 75% of their leaves, and the remaining leaves are healthy, and he can't find any signs of pests and diseases on them, so wants to know what it could be. Maybe it could be the wet weather. I think it is weather related in both cases, and I'm going more on the fact that we've had a very dry spring and we had that hot May that I think potentially has caused the problem with both your acers. I think the dry weather and the heat has caused the edges of your leaves to go brown and crinkled, Wendy, which is a common problem, or if you've got a windy site. And I think Andy, I think what's happened there is it's either the wind that's caused it or they've dried out and the plant has naturally dropped some of its leaves. So hopefully, you know, if the ground is dry, give them some water, get them growing, and hopefully they'll perk up and they'll be better next year. But certainly any dead bits, cut them off and just keep an eye on them. The next one is about Aubrasia, and it comes from Anne Newby Wotton, and she's saying that this year it's not been particularly good, the Aubrasia, and it looks like it's been attacked and eaten by slugs, and she wants to know what she can do. It's not looking as green and lush as normal. Well, Aubrasia is lovely in the spring. It's got those lovely mauve and purple flowers. It just sort of cascades down if you've got it on a bit of a rock garden or a slope. And I think this year, again, I'm blaming the weather, but we did get that hot weather, and it's an alpine. It likes it cooler, it likes a bit more rain, and we had those really, really hot temperatures in April and May when it would be flowering. So it just didn't put the growth on that you would normally expect. So I think what you need to do now is to make sure it's well fed to get the growth, because that's what will produce the flowers next year. And you also need to think about controlling the slugs with either the pet-friendly organic slug pellets based on ferric phosphate, or you could use nematodes or grit around the base of them, or beer traps. But you do need to get rid of the slugs in future, and fingers crossed next year it will do better. Next one is a weed question, and we often get this at the flower shows. It's about mare's tail, which is a real problem weed, and this is from Charlotte Everett, and she's tried killing it with weed killer because it's coming up through the gaps in her patio, and the weed killer's not worked particularly well on the mare's tail, but it's killed the other weeds. Well, yeah, I know exactly what you mean. It is a really tough weed to kill. The roots go down feet and feet, and it's got a waxy leaf, which makes it difficult for the weed killer to get into it. There are weed killers based on glyphosate and some of the fatty acids that will sort of knock it back, but they don't kill it really. So it is a difficult one to control. So what you could do, of course, is try the cultural method, as when it grows up above your paving, just chop it off with a hoe on a regular basis to weaken it. Some people use a little flame gun, that knocks it back a little bit as well. Or if you've got big gaps between the paving, try scraping it all out and getting some sand and cement and pointing it in so that it physically can't grow through, and hopefully that will sort it out. Hydrangea question next. This one comes from Margaret Smith, and she's got a hydrangea that's only produced 4 large flowers in the last 2 years, and they're on one side of the shrub. It's had loads of flowers before, and she wants to know what she can do to get more flowers on it. Well, I'm assuming this is probably one of the mop head hydrangeas, the ones that have the big pink flowers or bluey pink flowers. usually sort of from late summer into early autumn, and they are really lovely and spectacular. Now, if a shrub suddenly starts to only produce them on one side, it might be that other things have grown around it and it's casting too much shade on a part of the shrub and the flower buds don't develop, and that often happens as everything grows in the garden. It can also be due to pruning, because with this type of hydrangea we don't do a lot of pruning. It's more deadheading in the spring. If you start cutting them back because they're getting too big, then you get more growth but less flower. So you know, you've got to be careful how you do prune them. I think again what I would do is water it if the ground is dry in late summer, feed it with sulphate of potash because it's the time of the year when the flower buds are starting to develop for next year, and certainly don't do any autumn or winter pruning on it. Now, if you're looking for another type of hydrangea, anybody looking for ideas, this is one of my favourite hydrangeas. This is the Annabelle type. There are two types. There's the white form, white Annabelle, that has even larger lovely white heads on it, and this one is pink Annabelle. It's got these sort of dusky pink heads, and this is treated very different to the ordinary hydrangea that we grow in our gardens, in the fact that this one we do prune hard back, and we do it in the springtime. Believe it or not, in March that was cut back to just a couple of inches from ground level, so that is all this year's growth that it's made this season. It flowers on the new wood, and it flowers sort of from you know, mid-July. It's been in flower a couple of weeks now, and it will continue flowering well into September, and then you get the lovely heads there, dead heads in the winter, which look really ornamental, and then next March I will chop it down. So it's really easy to grow, and it's guaranteed to flower every year. So you know, if you're looking for a hydrangea that is easy to look after and you can't do anything wrong with pruning, then that is the one that you want. So we've now got a question from Richard Abraham, and he wants to know about red hot pokers. He's tried to grow them in his garden, but they don't thrive, and they normally die before they get established. Well, you've got to think where they come from. It's always worth just doing a little bit of research on any plant in the garden. Red hot pokers come from South Africa. We all think South Africa has been a very hot, dry country, and parts of it are, but once you get up into the mountains it's much cooler, and there's a lot more rain there, and these naturally grow in those areas, especially by streams where they've got the moisture. So what they don't like is to be very dry in the summer. So make sure wherever you plant them you improve the soil, put some organic matter in, garden compost, that will retain the moisture in dry soils. It will help the drainage in clay soils over the winter time, and always plant them in a sunny position, and then try and plant them in the first half of the season, so sort of from March until July, because then they've got time to get their roots established and a full growing season before the first winter. Although they are hardy, they just need to establish. So it's not one I would plant in the autumn. Have another go next year, and good luck with it next time. Next one is about a box hedge, and this one comes from Nadine Pennington, and she says, we've got a hedge, it's quite a tall hedge I gather, and she wants to know if it can be cut lower, and if she does cut it down, will it regrow or not? And she obviously knows you can't do any pruning until the birds have finished nesting, which is a good tip on any type of hedge cutting. Yes, Nadine, box can be cut hard. I've seen large, almost tree box plants, the buxus, in old gardens where they've just got too big, and they've cut them back with saws into the old wood, and they will reshoot. Very similar to you, that will do the same thing. If it's in a hedge, most of the growth on any hedges, whether it's privet or in your case box or beech, is made up until about this time of the year, and then it slows down. So I'd be a little bit loath to do hard pruning now, because it might not make much growth through the rest of the year. So I'd be tempted just to trim it as normal, and then wait until late next spring. Just check there are no birds' nests in there. Then you can give it more of a cut down into the older wood, feed it, and you've got again all the summer for it to make lovely new growth that you can trim a couple of times to get a lovely shape on it. So you can do it, but maybe now is not the ideal time to do it. Question here from Mavis and Peter Chapman. They bought their mother a magnolia tree 3 years ago, and it came in an 8-inch pot, and they were advised to pot it for 3 years and then keep it in a large patio planter. It's now in a 20-inch diameter pot that's 25 inches deep, so that is more than big enough, I'm sure. The leaves look healthy, but it's slow growing, and it would like to know how long it will be before it flowers, because that's what we want them for, don't we, magnolias? Lovely flowers. we don't know what type of magnolia it is, unfortunately. There are some that do take longer to produce flowers, especially the evergreen forms. There's one called Magnolia grandiflora that's got a big dark green glossy leaf, and when it does flower, and it can take up to 10 years to get them to flowering size, they're a lovely big sort of cream coloured waxy flower that's got the scent of a lemon, so it's beautiful, and they flower in the summertime. But most magnolias are spring flowering, things like Soulangiana and Stellata, and at the age that this is now, it's a few years old, I would expect it to be producing some flowers, even in a pot. I think the problem possibly is the fact that it's in a pot, it's big enough, but the compost soon runs out of nutrients and becomes starved, so make sure you give it plenty of feed. So in the spring, slow release fertiliser sprinkled on the top, and then through the summer, weekly liquid feed with a general liquid feed will be absolutely perfect, because we've got to promote lots of new growth, and it's at this time of the year, a little bit later, sort of into August and September, that the flower buds start to form for next year. So it really is important now with things like camellias as well to water and feed them. So just give it plenty of feed, that's all you can do with it really. And then finally, I think we've got all the questions on here. Yeah, we don't want to miss anybody out on this one. Yeah, finally, we've got Matt Lawton, who says he's not a massively keen gardener, and he'd like to know if there are any plants that will produce nice colours through the garden and they're going to be easy to look after in a fairly sunny position. Well, you're spoilt for choice really, and it depends what you like, Matt, I suppose. But for summer colour, things like penstemons are really good in the garden. The herbaceous geraniums you could put in there. Heucheras have, many of them have lovely coloured leaves. There's one just behind, if we can just see, there's a couple of heucheras in this border here that have got these sort of lovely burnt sort of coloured foliage, and they're there all the year round them. So that's something that's certainly worth growing. And they also produce flowers, and some of them produce quite bold flowers. This is where we can test the camera work here. This is one called Heuchera Paris. I've been deadheading it, so there aren't many on it, but they're just starting to flower again, and these have these lovely tall spires of flowers. So that's a good one. You could put in dwarf shrubs like spireas, you could put in hostas that are really good, and one of my favourite shrubs that I would put in all the gardens I go in is Hebe, and this is a lovely dwarf one. Some of them get quite big and it flowers through the summer. This one is called Hebe Sapphire, and it has these lovely mauve flowers. The bees absolutely love it, so it's really good for encouraging pollinators into the garden. So that one is certainly worth growing. So you're spoilt for choice, put a nice selection in and you're going to get lots of colour and flowers all the way through the season and foliage in the winter. So hopefully that's answered some of your queries and you can go out into the garden and enjoy it. Next year we will be back at the Chorley Flower Show with the Garden Roadshow, giving lots of talks and answering even more questions. So please do come and say hello to us. The show is the 31st of July and the 1st of August. So we'll be there. Hope you are too. But in the meantime, keep safe and we'll see you then. Bye.